Good morning. I'd like to call the Tuesday, May 5th meeting of the Reno County Commission to order, please. Our first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Nick and Adam aren't here from the health department yet. We'll move on and then come back to them when they appear. Item 4 is public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a public comment to the commission at this point? Seeing none, we'll move on to commission and county administrator comments. Only one I have this morning, a question to Randy. At last week's meeting, there was some suggestion that we wanted to get the planning commission to move ahead with their meetings and all. Have you had any ability to plan a location for that?
Yes. Last week after the meeting, I had a conversation with Don, the Public Works Director, and he talked with the Planning Commission Chair, or him and Mark did, and it is set up for the May meeting, the monthly May meeting, which I believe, calendar, it's 2 weeks from this Thursday, so I believe it's the 21st, and it will be down at the Public Works building. Don has spaced out the chairs, tables with 6 feet worth of the 6 foot distancing. I believe all the planning commissions, a couple staff members, and close to 10, I think it was 10 or 11 seats that he has available there. So yes, it is prepared for the meeting this month.
Okay.
And we will have, and I'll be there also, but if we have more than what's allowed in the space, we'll have people wait out in the lobby or outside, and as people leave, if their issues taken care of, they can leave and we'll let others come in if there's people there waiting.
Okay, so you don't expect a lot of people to come to that meeting?
There shouldn't be too many at this one. There's I think a tower and a house on the agenda.
Okay.
And then they may start talking about the protocol or the process for wind regulations, but it's not a public comment at this time.
Okay.
So maybe June, July, that's when a bigger meeting, and we may need a bigger space.
Okay, thank you for putting that together.
Yes.
Commissioner Hurst, do you have items this morning?
No, I don't have. We covered those yesterday.
Okay, Commissioner Bush, do you have items today?
Just one. I just want to let the commission know that I talked with Randy about elections because that's become a big issue in terms of our election staff, safety, paper ballots and everything. And so I talked with Randy and he said, why don't we just meet with Dawn and her staff? So we're going to meet Thursday morning. Thursday morning, just I don't have any issues or concerns, just to kind of talk about what their plans are, and I'll report that back to the commission next week.
Okay.
Thank you. I see people coming in the door, so we're going to, okay, before we do that, Randy, do you have any comments this morning?
Yeah, just letting you know that at the last, or at a meeting before when there were $1 million worth of budget cuts, the transportation aging, Barbara had some cuts to allocation to some agencies with some funding coming from the CARES Act, from federal state funding, some reimbursements for expenditures that she has. She's going to have additional savings there to make changes in her cuts. So we won't have to cut the allocations to outside agencies that she was going to make. That was in that request or that recommendation. So I've administratively made those changes. So there's a little bit of change on line items on the cuts, the same total dollar value, but some of the outside agencies won't see the cuts. I just kind of want to let you know.
So the numbers have changed. The numbers have changed, but the totals are the same?
Yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
That's fine.
I just was letting you know.
No,
Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And then just to give you an update, I'm meeting this week with every director about their budget request for 2021 and going over some questions I have about their budget request, making my recommended changes to their budgets at this time before we start having discussions at the commission meetings. I am sending out notifications or requests for the outside agencies to come in, try and maybe in the month of May to come before the commission to give about a 5-10 minute presentation to you guys about their agencies and their budgets for 2021 request. Some have decreases, some have remained flat. A couple have increased requests. So just going to let you know that the next probably 3 meetings, I'm going to try to have about 3 agencies per meeting to come talk to you guys.
Hey, would you send us out a total listing of what we've done in 2020 for that group so that we'll have that in front of us as they start coming in and speaking to us?
Yes, I will do that.
And then I'd just like to make the observation, I said this at the very first meeting with all department heads and elected officials. The expectation is a recession, a significant decrease in revenue to the county. And I can't speak to the other commissioners, but my goal is to protect jobs. That we keep our same team here, all the skilled employees we have stay here. If we can get a step increase in, I'd like to see what that would look like. But it really needs to be a pretty austere budget, and we need to just at least kick the can down the road one more year, hopefully in terms of equipment where we can.
Okay.
And I think that message has come out pretty consistently. Our department heads and elected officials are very intelligent, and they can read the newspaper as well, and they understand that things are coming. We do need to get new equipment in some cases, but where we don't, I'd like to see if we can't hold the line.
Okay.
And that's kind of my personal message as a commissioner.
Okay.
Bob, I pretty much agree with you, except I want to keep our step increases if we possibly can, because we don't want to fall behind the gun. That's happened before in previous commissions. So hopefully we can do that.
I hope so too. I hope so too. A lot of that's going to depend on the budgets we receive, though,
Yeah, bet.
and of course, based how impacted revenues are as we get into the new year.
Yep.
Anything else, Randy?
Just that I am continuing to work with some people at the annex and district court about the reopening of county buildings. Right now we aren't completely open, but everyone is full staffed at the annex. They're bringing everyone back this week. So we're full staffed, appointment only at this time for motor vehicles and taxes, but we're working on security measures and safety measures to try to open that up more to the public, maintaining the social distancing and number of people in that building, to look at possibly next week or the week after to be able to open that up.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have.
Let's move back to item 3, which is our weekly update from the Health Department and Emergency Management Director. Nick, do you want to go first?
Good morning, Commissioners. Nick Baldetti, Reno County Health Department Director, appointed health officer for Reno County. I just will give a quick sit rep familiar to the community-wide 8:30 call. In the United States this morning, as of 8:15, the United States has registered 1,180,634 cases of COVID-19 and registered 68,934 deaths as a result. State of Kansas, as of yesterday at 2 p.m., has registered 5,245 cases of COVID-19 with 136 deaths. 553 of those in the state of Kansas have resulted in hospitalizations. For Reno County, we're still at 40 cases, so we've held at that 40 for I think 3 days now. We haven't registered a mortality associated with COVID-19. We do have 21 recovered. So currently we're working 19 active cases of COVID-19 in Reno County. We've tested a total of 730 individuals within Reno County, with 690 of those being negative. That's a positive test rate of 5.48%, and we've tested 1.16% of Reno County to date. We currently only have one hospitalization that is in intensive care as a result of COVID-19, and I believe there's still 2 awaiting test results within the hospital. Lastly, we haven't had a number of self-reports in the Reno County self-report form for a while that have self-identified. We're up to 105, but we still only have 82 self-reported. We've held pretty steady at 82 for about a week and a half. And as I reported today on the call, we still only have 4 suspect cases out of that 82 self-reported, but they are very close to meeting the timing lapse. So we may very well clear that suspect case. And then with the onset of the Walmart testing that is being set up at the fairgrounds, that I would suspect that there would be less utilization of the self-reporting form. Again, the motivation and rationale for the self-reporting form was in the absence of availability of testing because you had to meet certain criterion. Now that those restrictions, if you will, have been loosened both at Hutch Clinic and Prairie Star, in addition to the availability of more broad testing excuse me, at the state fairground sponsored by Walmart, I would expect that less people are just going to be utilizing our self-report form. But we'll continue to keep it up and monitor that as appropriate in case somebody still utilizes it. Bring one thing up. I don't have much else to add in terms of the update for COVID-19. However, I did want to inform the commission. We had a special meeting yesterday, obviously, to discuss the governor's plan that was released on Thursday, as well as there was a meeting of the Reno County Economic Recovery Task Force yesterday at 3 p.m. There was some robust discussion in terms of interpretations around the governor's plan. And here in Reno County, one of those discussions, robust discussion, was the aspect of recreational activity and use of outdoor fields, parks, etc. So I put together some language. I'd be happy to read that to you, and then if there's potential feedback or anything from the board, or if you prefer to wait until after Adam's update, I'll leave it up to the board.
Go ahead. Let's hear it now.
Okay. So there have been some discussion around the use of public facilities and, in particular, recreational activity associated with organized versus non-organized sporting activities. It was released in a frequently asked questions document. Excuse me, a frequently asked questions document by the governor's office in regard to explicitly stating that organized sport activities, much like practice, is restricted under phase 1 of the governor's plan. However, the same mass gathering of groupings of 10 is still applicable, and it also states in that very language as well that it restricts organized activities such as practice, but it does not restrict the use and outdoor play such as tennis, playing catch, etc. So there's a lot of conversation around that. And so we've been getting a lot of questions. I know some of the elected officials here locally have been getting a lot of questions specifically, and that was broached in the Reno County Economic Recovery Task Force. And so I put together some language that I would offer to the board and see what comments you have, and then potentially would place that forward publicly in terms of guidance and interpretation here locally. So the language I put forth is non-organized recreational activity may be allowed at public and private outdoor parks if practicing appropriate social distancing of at least 6 feet, and groups of more than 10 who cannot accommodate 6 feet distancing are not allowed to congregate. All participants should practice proper hygiene and all equipment should be sanitized before and after all non-organized activity. It's keeping it broad, stating that as long as you don't have groups over 10 and you can apply the social distancing protocols, then the use of a park or outdoor facility, as long as it's non-organized, can still be facilitated. So, and I'm happy to read that again if you need to
Yes.
hear it again.
One more time.
Yep. Non-organized recreational activity may be allowed at public and private outdoor parks if practicing appropriate social distancing of at least 6 feet, and groups of more than 10 who cannot accommodate 6 feet distancing are not allowed to congregate. All participants should practice proper hygiene, and all equipment should be sanitized before and after all non-organized activity.
Nick, why does your comment there that you want to make public distinguish between organized and non-organized? Well,
It's-
to me, what's the difference if there's 10 or less? What's the difference? What is the potential harm of organized versus unorganized?
So the governor specifically calls out the aspect of organized in terms of if a coach were to bring together a team for practice, that constitutes an organized activity.
Okay.
But if a parent wanted to bring 8 kids together and play catch, then that would be a non-organized activity. Or if a group of 10 kids or less wanted to go play a game of 5-on-5 soccer at a park, something to that effect. The aspect of organization is what's called out specifically by the governor's FAQ page. So, and it's been a topic. I mean, it was an hour-long conversation yesterday. So,
Yeah, it was an hour-long conversation with 30 people partaking,
yeah,
which was a good conversation.
it was.
It was an hour.
So
But
you,
it would seem like to me that if the children in my neighborhood decided that they wanted to go out to the closest park and play a game of soccer or run around a little bit, that to get that accomplished, somebody would have to organize it.
Well, I think they're talking more about like summer league teams
Yeah.
Mhm.
and you know, running bases, doing plays, huddles, dugouts, and all that. I think that's kind of the mindset that they're looking at, kids sitting on the bench, those types of things.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think to Commissioner Bush's comment, I think what the governor is seeking to prohibit is the aspect of organized sports. We're in baseball season.
Yeah.
I know a lot of teams and clubs are ready and raring to go, and I think it's specifically being called out to try and circumvent organized practices. But I think to prohibit the availability of public facilities for the use of outdoor recreation as a result of trying to circumvent teams from getting together and practicing, I think is we sought to try and delineate that.
Okay.
if you've got a group of kids playing soccer, so at some point in time, they're going to be within 6 feet of each other.
Wouldn't
You
that
know,
be? Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
They will be, and also on a baseball field where you've got all that square footage out there. You know, I think just a little bit of common sense. Hopefully, whether they're organized or not organized, I agree with Commissioner Sellers. When you know, that's a fine line distinction between organized and unorganized, and I think that hopefully, if there's an adult involved with that they have enough sense to realize and you put in the cleaning of the equipment and so forth, and if it's mutually, used, like if a group of kids got 10 baseballs out there and 3 bats or whatever, it's going to be up to the individual person probably to clean their own glove if they're out playing.
Right.
So,
Probably be up to the person that organized it.
Well, that'd be your
The,
soccer mom, and that's okay.
Organize the unorganized event.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would.
Nick, I'm giving you a problem there, and you guys hashed this out yesterday, and I understand. I don't see the difference, but I respect what you're doing and what the governor said, and I think that she said on the 18th that this might change, I believe, to the next phase.
And I would
So
just
be it.
and I would just add, in this 40-minute conversation, we went from everything to being really restrictive, like dotting every T and crossing, dotting every I and crossing every T.
Right.
And then with that, we've come back to what Nick has, which is a really open statement, which is completely dependent upon common sense and what people have read and know about it, as opposed to you can't use dugouts, you can't sit on the sidelines. I mean, there was a lot of detailed stuff that we talked about, and I think Nick has come up with something that is our goal, which is
I
to
think it's fine.
leave it as open as possible for people to make their own common sense decisions, and yet still honor the spirit and the intent of the governor's order around organized versus unorganized events.
I agree with you. I think it's a very good statement. Can live with that.
Well, I think I wanted to vet it with the Board of Health. Board of Commission is also acts as the Board of Health for Reno County. And if there's general consensus, I think I might make the statement public in terms of a guidance interpretation specifically for Reno
Sure.
County.
I think we're in agreement with you.
Okay.
District Attorney, have any comment on that?
Probably shouldn't.
Okay.
You know,
He
All right,
wants to, though.
Keith, at this point, Keith, you're on the hook.
See what happens. You show up.
I guess the one
why did Hearst ask me that?
I guess the one thing that I would comment on is we have a specific government order or a governor's order, which is 20-29 versus 20-28. I think it's 20-29 that sets forth the things that are to be open and closed. It refers to sports facilities. I'm not sure it's sports facilities. It may be sports, some type of a more venue that would probably apply to something like Fun Valley. But it specifically says these facilities can't be open, and then it says you can have tournaments. And that's it. Then they come out with this fact page yesterday, and in the fact page, as they define what she said, they say, now you can't have practices. And for the life of me, when I read the governor's order in 20-29, I can't interpret that to say you can't have practices. I think as long as you're social distancing and using common sense, I think whether it be tennis, there are those sports. Somebody pointed out the fact that it was kind of there's a bias or discrimination against certain groups. Well, certain sports are different than other sports. If you're playing basketball, you're in very close contact with each other the entire time. The group goes from one end of the court to the other end of the court in close contact. Baseball and tennis, you're always going to be generally 6 feet apart, except for that incidental contact, which is permissible for like when you have a runner on first base and a first baseman, or a catcher and a batter. Never going to be really for more than 10 minutes at a time, which is the 6 foot rule, and no more than 10 minutes inside the 6 foot rule. I just have a hard time. That's why I say I shouldn't have said anything, because I just have a hard time understanding how the fact page interpreted the governor's order to include a limitation on practices.
Thank you.
Keith, real quick, just more of a personal question. I know you've got boys. When they were in sports, and maybe they still are, do you see that this would be, that what Nick is proposing would have any kind of a seriously negative effect on them getting out and throwing the ball around or hitting the ball or whatever?
And I understand where Nixon is walking a tight line, and we've had personal conversations about this. When the governor puts out a fact page that says you can't have practices, team practices, which is not exactly what her order says. The fact page is not her order. Her order was 20-29. I understand Nick walking that line, saying, well, no organized events, but as was mentioned by Commissioner Sellers, ultimately going to have somebody, some adult authority to organize or to supervise, make sure that they engage in social distancing, make sure that they are cleaning their equipment appropriately. You're going to have a parent looking at that. That's just the way it is. And the fact that, to me, you can't have tournaments. We all know what a tournament means, right? We all know what a sports complex is. And then to further somehow define that down to meaning practices, to me, defies logic or common sense. So I think what he has done is try to walk that line, and I think what he's done, what he's written or what he proposes, is good, as long as we understand there's a component of common sense in there.
Good, thank you.
As in terms of my report, I would stand for any questions, but that's the gist of it. If the Board of Health is in agreement, I'll just make this language public as Reno County guidance.
I would just add one question. You and I have talked about this morning. I know you talked about it at the 30 call, but we have a new audience.
Sure.
Could you talk a little bit about the fact that the governor has said that this is 2 weeks, but it could be extended based on state criteria? And since we have more testing that's going on, we're going to have more asymptomatic or more positive results. And how does that work, the addition of testing, with the governor's statement about getting us out of phase 1 into phase 2?
Sure. Yeah. So the specific deadlines, if you will, in the governor's order is, at minimum, each phase will constitute 2 weeks. But there's always the possibility, based off of the monitoring of the indicators for the state of Kansas. Again, this is what the governor's office has suggested, is that those phases could be elongated because per her guidance document for the state of Kansas, she is suggesting that she wants to see a downward trend in the aspect of number of total cases as per 100,000 populace. So essentially a per capita rate of aggregate number of COVID-19 positives, the hospitalization admit rate, and then mortalities associated with COVID-19. And for each one of those three indicators, those are the only indicators that are published in her plan, and she suggests she wants to see a 14-day downward trend, stable or downward trend in those three indicators. To Commissioner Bush's point, we continue to. I forgot to add this with the 8:30 call, but the state of Kansas now has moved to 49th. So we've moved up 2 spots to testing capacity, but at least we're testing per capita. But at least we're moving up. And so the reality is as we begin to test more, we're going to catch more. The net is going to be wider, so we're going to catch more cases. So, of course, the aggregate number of cases are going to go up. I can't speak for the governor's office and their interpretation of those indicators, so I'm solely speaking on behalf of the health officer of Reno County and how I would look at it, is that there has to be a realization and expectation, and in some respects a comfort with the fact that we're going to see an increased number of positive COVID-19 cases throughout the duration of this, throughout the end of the year, until at such time we have a vaccine. What I think is more important is an indicator underlying the total number of cases that we have is that positive test rate associated with the number of tests administered within each community, or in this case, the state of Kansas, and how many positives we're catching. That would be a percentage change in association of the number of tests that are administered and the number of positives we catch. And that percentage change in association with the number of total COVID-19 positives we have would tell us more about community spread than just the number of cases in totality that are being caught. So, for example, last week, generally speaking, the state averaged about 12% positive test rate in relation to the number of tests administered on a day-by-day across the state of Kansas and the number of positives. That is increased to 13% as of yesterday. I haven't ran it today. It's 13. That would show that we're beginning to catch more, but in association as a percentage change of the number of tests that are being administered statewide, we're catching more, and that's an upward trend. That's not what we want to see. Specifically for Reno County, last week at the beginning of the week, we held a 5.75% positive test rate. Again, that's a percentage change of the total tests that we administered and the number of positive we're catching. That increased around Thursday to just at 6%, and now we've dropped back down to 5.5%. That suggests a stability in terms of community spread because of the number we're catching in association with the number of people we're testing. And to me, that's a more accurate indicator and better window into what kind of community spread we have versus just the number in totality. But there has to be a realization of comfort and understanding that we are going to catch more, especially as we begin to open things up. We're going to catch more. It's a reality. Again, I'm not speaking for the governor's cabinet, but I would have to assume in terms of that first indices that there has to be underlying metrics that her team is looking at associated with that. Because to simply rely on the number of cases in totality, I think is a fool's errand to make policy decisions off of. Additionally, you monitor the activity of the hospital in terms of admission rates. And if you have stable or decreasing rates, but you have increased number of COVID-19 cases, well, that just suggests that, yes, people are contracting COVID-19, but they're not falling so ill that they're requiring hospitalizations, which the entire reason why there was a stay-at-home order, the entire reason for social distancing guidelines is to do just that, is to protect the healthcare capacity to be able to facilitate services, both COVID and non-COVID related. And if those indicators are flatlining and or decreasing, it means we've done exactly what we needed to do in terms of we slowed the spread enough to give the hospital and the healthcare system the opportunity to ramp up and put plans in place to be able to respond. And even if there's an uptick, but if we're not maxing capacity, again, we flatten that curve. We spread out we spread out the spread of COVID-19 enough to allow our healthcare system to react appropriately. And then, lastly, I guess my final comment would be on the indicator of mortality. I have concerns about the indicators of mortalities associated in relation to making decisions in terms of the phased reopening, in part because of the very nature in that people are those that require significant health care associated with COVID-19 contraction are being hospitalized for weeks on end. But with any illness, mortality will always be a lagging indicator. Meaning, if someone contracts COVID, they're not dying that day of COVID-19. It's going to be weeks down the line that they might succumb to COVID-19. Now, it might be faster, it might be longer. And so if we're looking at a 14-day downward trend in mortality rates in association with a 14-day downward trend in total COVID-19 positives and hospitalizations, well, we're always going to be beholden to the lag associated with mortalities. Because we'll never have the same trend associated with mortalities that we will have with positive COVID-19 cases and hospitalization use. It'll always be a lag. So again, I don't know what necessarily the governor's office is looking at, but I think there has to be other indicators that underlie those main three that should be helping to feed the decision in terms of whether we move to phase 2 on May 18th or it gets elongated. With all of that said as well, and Adam and I had this conversation, and maybe he can speak to it a little bit when he comes to the podium too, I think there needs to be an understanding too. The governor put the plan out on Thursday and instituted through Executive Order 20-29, Phase 1. Each phase for the state of Kansas is installed by executive order, which also means that the governor could change the rules every time. Now, I hope not, but it's almost a wait and see pattern to see, number one, when we can transition to phase 2. But then if she stays in lockstep with the plan that she's put out. Now, in her public address, she stated this is a living document. which, as we know, this entire response has been a fluid target. You know, we're constantly shifting and responding to new information. But I just make that statement in terms of, you know, the governor is able to move us into phase 2 via executive order and potentially change the rules associated with phase 2 if she and her team deem it necessary. So anyway, probably a little bit longer.
No, we need all the detail we can get. And again, with the reminder that a lot of us hear these calls, but the public audience for this doesn't hear this.
Sure.
And so the more we can get the message out in your own words, the better we are.
Sure.
Agreed.
I think what you brought before us make a lot of sense in analyzing the trends and why and how to interpret those trends. Unfortunately, those don't make headlines.
Right. What I will say, and sorry not to interrupt you,
go right
Commissioner,
ahead.
but what I will say is we're working very hard in terms of the health department. Our COVID-19 dashboard that is public facing, we're tracking those trends and they're publicly available. So as I report on them, additionally, the lay audience, anyone, just goes to RenoGov website, the coronavirus landing page. We have a link to our dashboard, and those metrics, those trends that I speak to, specifically for Reno County, are publicly facing and available for everybody to follow.
Okay, thank you.
Just real quick. So we're being held by, just so the understanding I have, just so we're all clear on this, is that the governor's going to look at this point in time on statewide cases per 1,000 people.
100,000. 100,000.
100,000. I'm sorry, 100,000 people. So, like, I looked at Seward County. I think at Seward County they've got like 800 or something.
Like
I mean, even more than Ford.
Yeah, Ford, Seward, and Finney are our hotspots out west.
So is Seward meatpacking or something like
Yes.
that?
All three are
All three of
associated
those are
with
meatpacking?
Yeah.
So realistically, we could have a downward trend in Reno County. And the way everything is being written right now, these other counties, God love them, God help them, but they're having these huge spikes. We could be stuck in phase 1 until they come under control, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
I mean, is that what I'm hearing?
If the decisions at the statewide level are, if the decision is to hold the entire state within each one of these phases, which is my understanding is the intent, then yes, based off of activity in other parts of the state, Reno County will be held to, you know, those indicators.
Okay.
You know, and I think that speaks to the aspect of Commissioner Hurst made a point yesterday, where I think there has to be some aspect of common sense and home rule application and trust in local officials to make the best decisions associated with their communities for which they serve and they live in. You know, we're all professionals in the communities that we live in, and we want the best for our communities. But currently, the governor's order takes that ability to make some local decisions out of our hands right now.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I will reiterate what I said yesterday, that it's time to provide some local control and let the state understand that our local counties can do excellent work here, and not be constrained by another, whether it's a metropolitan or a non-metropolitan area. Each county should handle their caseload appropriately, and that's all.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready for Adam?
And Commissioners, Adam Weiss, our Emergency Management Director. I'll be very brief this morning. I just want to touch briefly on what Nick talked about. You know, hitting the governor's, what she's going to produce in her next EO is like hitting a moving target. We had a state conference call last night at 5 o'clock, and you know, we talk about these plans all day, and we're planners, and that's what we do. And we try to get our community prepared for what could happen next. But it's impossible to hit that moving target. And on that 5 o'clock phone call, I just finally had the epiphany. You know, we're spending hours planning this. We really don't know what that EO is going to say. So it makes it very challenging for not only us to plan, but to keep the community informed. So that's a sense of frustration for us. It's I don't know how many hours we spent talking about phase 2 of our plan, phase 3 of our plan, and how to move our community forward out of this, and not knowing what she's going to produce. It makes it very challenging to put our best foot forward and plan for that. So moving on from that, we're currently one of 89 counties in Kansas that have declared a public health emergency. For those of you who don't know, there's 105 total counties in Kansas. There's 82 of those counties have reported positive cases of COVID-19. That's an additional 2 counties from just yesterday. KDHE is monitoring 66 outbreaks with 1,909 cases, 190 hospitalizations, and 91 deaths. That's 6 more outbreaks than what they were monitoring over the weekend. The outbreaks are in long-term care facilities, group livings, churches, gatherings, conferences and meetings, correctional facilities, healthcare, and private companies. So as you can see, the numbers keep continuing to go up. I will tell you that our virus is still here, circulating in the community. We continue to rely heavily on our community, our responders, our employees, and we're using all available resources to help our community. Just a reminder, testing will continue Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this week. The Walmart test site that's on State Fair Road, 200 State Fair Road, and that goes from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We conducted, there was 47 tests the first day, 50 tests the next day, and then 70 tests was the final numbers for Saturday. So there are quite a few individuals being tested. Our PPE, our personal protective equipment, our inventory and burn rates are due to the state tomorrow. I have to prepare a report once a week for the state to show them exactly what we have on hand and what we've used countywide. So that'll take some time, but I'll put that together and it'll be submitted. And then the Battelle cleaning system that we talked about yesterday, it sanitizes masks that have been used, that is up and operational yesterday. So they'll start receiving shipments and cleaning those and sending those back out. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Adam, help me out here again. I think we discussed this the other day, but just because you have a swab test that's positive doesn't necessarily determine whether you are an active spreader or just received the COVID-19, or you've already had it and you've recovered. Is that accurate? Or?
So Nick can talk a whole lot more intelligently about that than I can, but I will tell you there's a whole bunch of asymptomatic people out there, people that might not show the symptoms, or they might not have the normal symptoms that we're used to, and we believe those are circulating in the community. Currently, there's no antibody testing available to us. So this is just a swab test for the Walmart test site in particular. You have to be showing symptoms or be a first responder or medical care professional to be asymptomatic to be tested.
Okay. Thank you.
This Battelle Clinics, is that Battelle?
Battelle with a B.
Okay. Is this like some $250,000, $300,000 piece of equipment, or what are we talking about here? Do you know?
I'm sure it's outrageous. I don't have any idea how much it is. It was expensive enough where it's just on contract for 6 months. It wasn't purchased by the state. It's on a contract.
That tells me all I need to know.
With FEMA and the state.
That tells me all I know. If there's just one for the state on a 6-month contract, that tells me all I need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to cut one of Don's graders, but maybe not. Nick, maybe you might know this number since you talked about it a little bit, but we have like 40 cases in Reno County. How many are in the hospital? Do you know? How many are in ICU? And do we have anybody on a ventilator? Sorry. But I mean, those are some of the major variables you talked about.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a good time just to do an update on where we're at.
Yeah, so 40 total COVID-19 cases since the beginning of March. 21 have recovered, 19 are active. One individual is in intensive care, was on a ventilator as of 2 days ago, but has been extubated, and so now he's on ancillary oxygen, but he is recovering. And then there's 2 in the quote-unquote COVID ward that are awaiting testing, but are not in intensive, are not requiring intensive care.
How many beds are in that ward? Do you know?
I think each ward, I want to say the number is 40 or 44.
That's fine.
But there's two there, so the hospital has 2 wards in addition to their intensive care unit, specifically for COVID-19 response.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Nick, on the governor's weekly conference call last Friday, she made mention that the state is hiring numerous people. She said 400 at that point in time to do contact tracing. I'm assuming we're doing our own within Reno County, so we're not using the state employees.
We're not, and actually Adam has a little bit more information in terms of how that hiring is going, but she announced that they're going to be hiring and pulling state employees from other aspects of the state workforce to do contact tracing, as well as I think they're hiring or asking for volunteers. But yeah, specifically, so the initial contact will need to be made by the local health department and epidemiological, whoever's working that, whether it's a epidemiologist or a nurse or whoever the staff member is from the local level. At such time, my understanding of the process is that then if capacity is a concern at the local level, it can be handed off to this pool of case contact workers who will do the follow-up, sit rep, daily check-ins with individuals to check on their health status. Are they getting better? Are they getting worse? Any concerns? Things of that nature. I have heard through public health circles, however, that that pool of case contact tracing in terms of priorities is specifically allocated for the more rural, smaller staffed health departments, and then it will go on down the line. And we're classified as a medium to medium large health department, so we wouldn't be necessarily at the top of the list for that kind of support.
Well, and you really don't need that help, do you?
No, we don't need it right now.
Okay.
So
I just assumed that it was probably to be used in Ford, Finney, Seward, or...
most likely, yeah.
Okay.
I think Ford specifically is they just had an explosion of cases.
Okay. Well,
So-
I think the public and certainly the commission always enjoys your weekly update. Personally, I would hope that you don't have to continue to come for too much longer, but I got a feeling that you will be. So, any more questions before we let the two go? Adam, I can't help but ask you, I know you disagreed with the commission's feeling to remove the burn ban. It was kind of at the end of the season and so forth. Did it cause any known fires that the rural fire departments had to go to?
I don't have the exact numbers, but several.
Several.
I would just estimating. I'd estimate at least 10, and of those 10, there was one homeowner that was also injured.
What the homeowner?
There was a homeowner that was injured and sent to the hospital with burns.
I see.
And these were brush piles, or
I could pull all the numbers if you wanted it, and I could tell you exactly what was burning, but they were all from controlled burns.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Are there any additions to the agenda to be made by the commissioners or by staff?
Now I'd like to make one addition to a discussion item on the coronavirus communication for the county.
Okay, where do you want that put?
I guess just number 8 as a discussion item.
Okay.
No voting. And Nick, I would ask you to stay around for that item. Thank you.
Okay, is there any,
I have none.
okay, do we need a motion to approve that item to be added? I assume we do.
I would move to approve the added item for discussion with today's agenda.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Bush?
Yes.
Commissioner Hurst?
Yes.
Commissioner Sellers?
Yes. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. We have vouchers in the amount of $107,427.59. We have change orders, 171 to 174 and also 176. We have two items from the Public Works Department. Award a bid of $127,365.30 to Thies Dozer Service for repair of the 82nd Avenue east and west of Wilson Road, and also an agreement with Kirkham Michael and Associates for engineering services for routine federal aid secondary highway system biannual bridge inventory and appraisal for the sum of $32,226. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I would so move as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I'd like to ask Don Britton to come, and I was not necessarily surprised, but I was intrigued by the fact that my short period here on the county commission, it seems like his department is very capable of doing most everything. So I was surprised that you're having an outside contractor do this work on 82nd Street. Would you explain why that's beneficial to us?
Don Britton, Director of Reno County Public Works. And you are correct, we are capable of doing that job and everything that we do. That job there on 82nd Street requires many 100 tons of rock to be hauled in from a quarry probably in eastern Kansas, but even a greater deal is the hundreds of cubic yards of dirt that will have to be hauled in to fill in those locations. Those will be done by dump bodies, semi-trucks, and stuff like that. In order for us to do that, it would take all of our dump trucks, and many of our staff and equipment, and a lot of time, and would shut down us building our bridges and overlaying our roads. And I thought that at this project, where FEMA is going to pay us back 75%, we're better served to our taxpayers for us to continue overlaying roads and building bridges.
Okay. Very good explanation. The repair to this, we always have water out there in that area when the floods come, when they do. Is the repair of this such that whatever's done out there won't be harmed the next time?
Well, we're putting very large rock in these areas and then dirt on top of it. But what the deal is we had 200-year floods right in a row and nonstop. And those culverts there was just like a fire hose, and that's what's caused that to happen. This is the first time it's ever happened in those locations. But yes, we're building it up stronger than it was before with the large, multi-100-pound rocks that we're putting right there where this water dumps out. But then a lot of this that we're repairing is out on private property too. It's like a pond, and that's why it's going to take so much dirt. And our riprap will end, which is rock at our right-of-way, but that should prevent that from starting eroding before it gets to the landowner.
I think you showed us pictures of that here a few weeks ago.
Yes, I brought this to you prior to this being done. It's a massive thing. They had to go out in there. I don't know if they used a boat or what to measure where the bottom of it was. That's how deep this is. But that's why we didn't do it. We had another washout on 56th Street right at the canal, at the new bridge that we built there about 7 years ago. And I did choose to have a rock hauled in from eastern Kansas, and we did repair that one instead of paying out the...
Okay, I appreciate those answers, and they're very understandable. So,
Anything else? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Don.
are there any other questions or discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Commissioner Bush?
Yes.
Commissioner Hurst?
Yes.
Commissioner Sellers?
Yes. Okay, we'll move to item 8A, a discussion requested by Commissioner Bush.
Yeah, I don't have a formal presentation. I just wanted to kind of open up the door on some discussion items here, and I'd also like Nick to, I guess after I'm done with a couple of points, to come up and talk about his experience. But one of the things that the commission asked me to do was to represent them with the coronavirus task force, and I have diligently attended just about everything. But I'm happy to, and that's part of my responsibility. But one of the first things that I was very impressed with was the relationship between Nick and Deborah Tufel with the chamber and the work that they did, putting together Zoom meetings, coming in. They met with us personally, myself and Randy and chamber staff. We met downstairs in the veterans room, social distancing, but we to put this together. One of the things that we talked about doing was creating kind of a county-wide, and I want to emphasize county-wide. We have gotten great response from just outside of the Hutchinson area. We have the mayor of Nickerson, we have the mayor of Bueller on the call. I also know the South Hutch mayor is on the call, and I believe we have other clerks. And what we wanted to do was create a county-wide communication system. And so what they've done, and you all have been part of this, they created Zoom meetings, telephone calls, mailers, email addresses, and the end result of their work, and I do mean the chamber's work, is that when we talked about getting these communities, these industries together, we had 380 people, individuals, that were on, I believe it's 14 or 16 industries, I can't remember. So it's very widespread, a huge number of people. The chamber staff and Nick would get on, would go over the coronavirus, its impact, and then we would open up discussion for each one of the committees. And then the committees would choose a committee chair, if you will, be part of the steering committee. And then the steering committee then would meet. The steering committee is about 48 to 52 people, and that includes staff when I get on those calls. And so that's coordinated. And through that, information is put together into a larger group, funneled down to the smaller group of 380, and then funneled back up to the steering committee. So we had one meeting at 7 o'clock at night. I got one email of things that have been coalesced for that day from the chamber at 10:30 at night. So the chamber is doing an incredible job with this in terms of coordination and communication. My thinking as a business owner is that we have a relationship with them, and each one of you has a handout that talks about the items. Nowhere on there is the coronavirus, and nowhere on there is coordinating with the public health and taking the lead on that. Nowhere on there is putting together all these meetings, doing the emails with the Zoom addresses and putting that together. Nowhere on that is collating who's on the call, who's not on the call in their system. So this is just the beginning of it. As you know, and as Nick said, each phase from the governor's office will open up more industries requiring more work. It will mean that everybody has to touch base again to see if there's any changes in those industries, and this will go all the way through June or July. The medical professionals tell us that there will be a spike in the fall. So we need to keep our communication system running, reminding people, reminding business owners. The chamber will be getting calls about the FAQ and the separation, things like that. The entrepreneurial task force at the Quest Center, when they have a new business, they will need to rely on the chamber to help them with those rules and regulations and how that process is put together. And that's going to go all the way into the fall. So my thinking is that that what we do is we basically do an addendum to our relationship with the chamber. We provide them with a $50,000 flat rate to get us through December 31st and to coordinate with the public health department, specifically Nick, on providing all of these communication services to all the groups. And again, just a reminder, these aren't just businesses. We have a mental health group. I don't know if we have a mental health, we have a health group. We have a nonprofit group. We have a mayor's group and a variety of groups in addition to the strict business community, which you could just say, well, that's their job. Well, their job isn't coordinating and sending the message from the public health department through their system to business people. Their job is to put businesses together, educate, get them through the entry system, application system, and loans. So I think we're asking for something greater than that. And the work I've seen, I think this would also help go back towards all the work they've done. Nick, if you wouldn't mind just talking about your relationship and standing for questions. And also, I'm assuming you agree with me, but you might.
It's hard for him to get up here and disagree with the commission, I think. But we'll see.
Ask
We'll
Don.
see.
Don
We'll see.
already left. Don knows a lot about disagreeing with the commission.
No, I would echo very strongly the sentiments of Commissioner Bush. Even before COVID response, the relationship and expansion, I think, under Deborah Tuffel's leadership is an infusion of understanding that economic development and economic prosperity includes an aspect of health and well-being. And so she's been, since she has taken over at the chamber, she has been more engaged from the health aspect, from a public health perspective. And I've been very impressed with that. But to Bob's comments, and specifically around COVID-19 response, it was actually the Chamber of Commerce's suggestion, and they facilitated that first City Hall meeting that was held at City Hall that had the Prairie Star Hutch Clinic representation, hospital representation, as well as the mayor, Ms. Carvalho, and myself. First addressing publicly, and that was actually facilitated and set on Facebook Live and through their media channels and their relationship and contract with Queen Bee in terms of facilitating that. And that's really been, I think, the onset of Deborah's been very engaged with her community, the business community, in terms of trying to be at the forefront of information and dissemination to her audience. And then as we continue to move forward, and obviously there was major implications from a business and economic standpoint from the stay-at-home order, we continue to be in constant communication in terms of what was happening and how that was affecting the business community and her audience. And as Commissioner Bush, seems like a year ago now, but I think it's only been a couple weeks. Initially, we began to have conversations about formulating a local plan for when the stay-at-home order from the governor's office, in the absence of her guidance document, what that looked like. Really, from the get-go, I mean, I had a conversation with Bob, and I immediately went over to the chamber and sat down with Deborah and said, hey, look, I think we need to partner on this because I can try and reach people, but you have a built-in communication chain with this very audience that we're trying to communicate with and formulate this, and we want to be as engaged and transparent and open as possible. And from the get-go, she's literally opened the doors to her entire staff and her pool of resources, and has been right there with me, spending late nights with me and with the health department staff on Zoom calls and formulating discussions and bouncing ideas off and vetting and reaching out to specific individuals. So I would very much say, outside of everything that's happened at the state level, the success of communication and, quite frankly, collaboration is just as much predicated on the aspect of the chamber, Deborah and her staff's willingness, and quite frankly, I mean, to my knowledge, they're not being paid for the work that they're putting in right now. And it's just out of an aspect of loyalty and commitment to this community that the chamber has really stepped up in a major way. And they continue to. I mean, this is the expectation in the formulation of the Reno County Economic Recovery Task Force was first and foremost in the short term to establish, in the absence of any governing guidance from the governor's office, a plan specifically for Reno County, and secondarily for the long term, keeping that core group, the RCERT task force, together in terms of working specifically towards economic recovery for Reno County in the long term. And that group, I mean, there's been no ask from the Chamber of Commerce. They've just said, we'll do it. And so I've just been very impressed and very thankful for Deborah and her team because, I mean, really the resources and logistics that they've offered have been monumental in terms of catalyzing this community's response in such a short amount of time. So that, I guess, and I would stand for any specific questions, but I mean, I've just been very impressed and very thankful for their help.
Nick, we took Reno County, and basically through you, and then with the involvement of the Chamber of Commerce, got onto this 2.5 weeks ago, and with the intent of having a document if the governor didn't do anything.
Right.
To your knowledge, were there many other counties that got that far in the process before the governor? The only one I can think of is Sedgwick that I'm aware of, and they said, we're not going to do a damn thing. I'm not supposed to say damn here. They said we're not going to do anything.
Look,
Just
the pandemic's not here anymore.
yeah. Were there other counties that were involved in a process like we did?
So the ones that I have knowledge of were Sedgwick County, Shawnee. I believe Harvey formulated a task force, but I don't think they got to the point where they had working documents that were beginning to disperse. If I may, Sedgwick County, when they found out about what we were doing and the model for which we were doing it, asked for all of our documentation, resources, and the model that we were doing. Shawnee.
So would it be fair to say that the Sedgwick County management had interest in copying what we were doing, but the commission did not?
So I had direct contact with my peer in terms of the health department director, and then Sedgwick County had brought on Wichita State's Community Engagement Institute to help in the facilitation and formulation of a plan. And it was my contact with Wichita State that reached out to me and said, please send us everything that you have. You're basically, Reno County is far and away in a better spot than we are. And again, that was in the absence of the governor's document on Thursday. But I had heard that I think there was some activity around planning in the Northeast corridor in terms of Kansas City, Johnson, Wyandotte. I'm just not familiar with those documents, but I know Shawnee specifically is another county, which are larger areas, and I think Riley County also. But those are the only ones that I heard of, and basically on the channels in terms of public health, there was a lot of, can I please see your documents?
So for those counties that didn't do the work that our county did, a format that the governor at least put out was probably somewhat helpful. And I'm not trying to get political here,
No.
but if you don't do anything, a
late.
framework
Too late.
is at least positive.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we better
I-
get away from that.
Way
I
to
think
go, justification.
if I could, it's a fair comment, and I will say that again, we're classified in Reno County as a medium to large health department, so we have the benefit than some of our much more frontier and rural health departments of having further resources in terms of manpower and resources allocated to the work of public health, and so. I think for many of those counties, there is the need for a plan
Right.
whatsoever.
Okay.
But I would also argue it would, for a county our size and geographically where we're located, we could not simply sit back and wait to hope and assume that we were going to be told what to do, with the potential of there may not be any guidance. That's much different than a county of 5,000 who doesn't have major economic drivers, and they really have one form of commerce, and that's heavy ag saturation. And we just weren't in a position to be able to just say, well, we'll just wait to see what the governor's office tells
I'm
us.
very supportive of all the efforts that took place and many hours of meetings, and I'm very pleased that 383
Yeah.
people, business people, industrial people, government people, worked towards the betterment of Reno County. I just think that's phenomenal. And so I think Bob's request is for us to take this under advisement. It's a discussion item. And how would you like to suggest that we look at that in a formal way?
I think if there's some support for this, then I would ask Randy to get with Deborah and put together, and again, kind of a $50,000 long-term communication through December 31st on the issues that we talked about, with maybe monthly reporting, with the understanding that there's a lot of work that's been done. We don't know what the work is going to have to be done. And this would enable then Nick to not have to go back to a contract or rewrite things or come back to the commission. And he'd be able to contact Deborah and work with her as much as was needed. And with the least amount of reporting, with the major focus. And I would just say one more thing. We cut $1 million out of our budget. And what I'm asking, because of the coronavirus and our expectation of a recession, and what I'm asking is not for an epidemiologist, which we might get to at a $60,000 to $80,000 piece, but a communication piece for the entire county, which is $50,000 of that $1 million. And I think that while we're taking dollars out, we have to be very careful about spending them. But I think this is going to continue to pay out for us long term throughout the entire county with our level of communication and transparency. And Nick's staff can't do it. They just can't do it. And so we need that help. And I think we have a responsibility to compensate, especially an organization like the Chamber that is not a for-profit business. That's my speech.
Okay, and I don't disagree with your request, and I'm not disagreeing that I don't totally agree with you. The only thing that you said that I have some concerns about is we've already cut $1 million out of our ongoing budget this year.
Right.
Who knows? We don't know at this point how much more we might have to cut out of that budget before the end of the year.
I agree.
And so that's my only statement is yes, we cut 100, but who knows how much more we might have to cut before this thing is over with.
And that's why I brought it up. I
Yeah.
want us to have that conversation
Sure.
on all of those issues.
Sure.
And for the three of us to come to consensus.
Okay.
I was impressed with the whole process. The fact that every community in our county was asked to participate. It's their loss if they didn't. And I was a little disappointed with the fact that some of our communities did not actively participate, because it affects their citizenry as well as it does everyone else who participated in that conversation with that first meeting with the government and mayors and so forth.
Absolutely.
Our allocation to the chamber, I think, was $37.5 this last year. I think we cut $2,500 out of it from the previous year. I'm also, we'll talk about dollars and as we get into this and find out more, Randy and Deborah and so forth will participate in. I am one to believe that one shouldn't, when you get things that entail a recession, that may entail a recession, we don't know. We don't have that crystal ball, but indicators are that we're going to have a little setback of some type, and it'll affect some more than others, but it'll affect basically everyone to some extent. That's when you don't cut your future increase in valuation, and so I don't know that I would want to cut things that could add on to our community in employment as well as tax base. What that amount additional is, I understand the reason for it. I think it's great to process. Now, some of this process may be something that comes down the next line. We don't know what the next situation may be. To have that on hand and to be able to converse has some positives. I am a little bit like Commissioner Sellers in looking at what our revenue may be, and the fact that that number could be fluid.
My comment was not meant to be negative at all towards
understand.
your request.
No, I understand.
At all. And I think we need to go forward considering your request and your thoughts at this point in time.
Is it okay if I,
It's always been, in my opinion, and I'm going to make my comment here that I've been involved in government for a long time, from the community college level to the city level to the county level, and I've never thought that the various groups of government, and you can't call the chamber government, but it's an ex officio type organization, have ever worked together as well as they should for the benefit of the people.
Mhm.
Now, Bob, here is something that has worked for the benefit of the people, and no question about it. And
Yep.
but my only, what I'm trying to state here is some expectation of working for the benefit of the people should be what we're all trying to do at any moment and give our best.
Right.
And that's what Deborah's given to us. is the
Absolutely.
best, so.
and
Yeah.
faithlessly, I would just like to respond to one comment. One of your comments, Ron. I agree with you, and that's why when the chamber is in the middle of all of this, every new business, every existing business, every business that wants to expand is going to have access to the chamber and the public health department with the recommended coronavirus setup. So, for example, if I'm a new business and I walk in, they're going to say, well, you need to have 6 foot of separation. I mean, there's all these things that are new now that all of these businesses will be able to get that are new, the entrepreneurs, but also our older businesses as they look at adjusting their space. And the biggest thing that's going to bring back revenue to our community is, number one, if the employee going in there feels safe. They're in a safe working environment. And number two, if the customers or patrons or clients or whatever you call them, if they feel safe. That's how we're going to get this thing kick-started. That's going to help increase revenue. That's going to increase sales. And hopefully that's going to get us on a faster step forward, is by going through the frequently asked questions and the chamber having that knowledge base already without somebody having to show up and say, what do I need to do about this? Or they put things too close together. They'll have someone that can help them that's not part of government, not part of the public health department, because Nick's people are slammed. So that's just a quick response to your comment.
Mhm.
This is the second time that the chamber's put together something, and I don't mean to take health department and other people out of it, okay? But this is the second time they've spearheaded a publication, if I might use that, guidelines, publication on what the county has available that a state department either has used or needs to use. But this is the first one. Other counties and the chamber got highly recommendation on is there's a Department of Commerce and Department of Ag program that they put together, and other counties wanted to see it. They did such a great job with it. With such a great job as the health department and everybody did, other counties want to do it. Maybe the state ought to look at what we do.
They should. They should.
Great. Okay, so we're gonna, at some future time and some future time in the near future, talk about this request.
So are we putting this on as a discussion item for next week, and invite Deborah to come in and talk? Or do you want to put it on as an action item and invite Deborah to come in and talk after meeting with Randy and coming up with a written proposal to consider?
It's your request. What do you want to do?
I'd like to make it an action item next week.
Okay.
If you're comfortable with that, I'm not trying to push the process, but let's just get moving.
Okay. So
Yeah,
be it.
I think that would work. I think that gives us plenty of time. If we can't get something done in a week, is another week going to make any difference?
Absolutely. And for what we're asking for, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel here. So Randy, is that acceptable to you? And Nick, with your involvement?
That works.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for the commission about what we're asking for?
No, but you are set on that dollar. So that dollar amount, you just really need a written agreement and what it entails,
Yes.
the parameter or the
Yes, with
description.
with like a monthly report as to the actions that they've done around the coronavirus communication with some simple statistics.
You're looking for a flat dollar amount, not an up to amount.
A flat
Here.
dollar amount through December 31st, and that way the public health department as basically them on call for whatever issue comes up in relationship to the coronavirus, because we don't know what the future is. But
This-
we want to be able to get after it right now.
This would be directly to the Chamber of Commerce,
Correct. And we would give
Not
reports
any-
back. Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
not any to the health department or anybody else.
No, this would be
Just-
directly to the Chamber of Commerce for the whole communication matrix, which Nick didn't really talk about this in detail, but I think we all know his staff aren't set up for this, especially when you've got 2 or 3 chamber staff organizing every meeting and all the documents going out. And it would just be through December 31st. And then to your point, as we look at the budget for next year, we'll have a lot more information in the fall. I know it's after the budget, about where the coronavirus is and what we need. This could be a one-time deal and done. My hope is that it is. But that's why it's kind of time-bound and just dollar-bound.
Okay, so be it.
Okay. You're looking like you're
Okay.
still thinking.
Are there
Yeah, I
any-
am. I
Okay.
am, because
Yeah.
of the $50,000 mark. I kind of like to have a little justification. I know you can justify it. I understand that,
Sure.
Bob. Sure
No, no,
does.
no,
That's my thought here, is because
What are the things
what
that-
is the dollar amount? What is an appropriate amount to if we were to hire a consultant to do some of this?
I think the easiest way to do that would be to ask Deborah to put together the number of meetings they've had, staff involvement, and resources that they've used in terms of equipment and time. And honestly, I picked that number because I think that we're going to spend less by doing a flat fee
Yeah.
as opposed to asking for an itemization. That's why you're absolutely right. We have to have a justification and a reason, but I think when you look at the amount of time and energy that they put in meetings, if they were to bill us that, like I would bill you, or maybe Ron would bill you, or if someone asked you to do an additional section, you know what? Sometimes a flat rate is a lot better. The other thing I like about it is we don't have to nickel and dime these folks. You know, it's not report, justify, send an invoice in. It's just get this job done, document all the work that you're doing, and I think that we'll be dollars ahead based on what I've seen.
And the reason I bring this up is because, they're an outside agency. We have a lot of outside agencies that don't provide us with information that we give funds to, that I've always had a problem with. So that's kind of why we don't have their budget. Not interested in their budget, but we need some thought process behind it of the dollar amount. And
Sure.
I'm sure you've already thought that process, but
Yeah, but you're right. We need to have an open meeting discussion about spending county dollars, and I agree 100%. That's why I want to discuss it today. And it sounds like everyone's okay with us going to that next step.
yeah.
And then Randy will work with Deborah on putting together, not just the resources they would provide,
Right.
but then also maybe what they've already provided in terms of hours spent. on
And what the
staff.
future looks like going through the end of the year,
Well,
right?
Well, my-
I mean,
No,
what they can project their involvement,
Yeah.
okay?
yeah, I hear what you're saying, but boy, I tell you, how about this? I've spent more time on this in the last 3 weeks than I thought I would ever spend on it.
Sure.
It has just been amazing. The number of people involved, the
Don't
groups
you
involved.
think I knew what I was doing when I asked you to do this? There was
Well,
no
yeah,
surprise to me about the amount of time I was going to take.
I knew, but I mean, it really is one of those things where, we spent 40 minutes talking about baseball yesterday. And it was a good discussion. It was very important, and it came up with this policy today. But I mean, when you think about billable hours, that's why I kind of would really like us to stick on a flat rate. And in the future, if we don't have a big spike in the fall, and we have all this in place, maybe it's not going to be a big deal. But if the governor comes in and there's a big spike and we do a shutdown, we start all this again, it could be huge. So,
Understood. I think
okay.
everybody understands
I think you're
what
ready.
you're
I
asking
think you're ready to go.
Well, you criticized me a week or two ago about having an hour and a half meeting with very few things on the agenda, so I might give that back to you today.
But I had important things on the agenda.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you for your patience, Chairman.
Oh,
Thank you for your
I
patience,
think
Commissioner.
ideas from the individual commissioners are always sought out and appreciated, and we'll see where this goes. Is there any other items, Randy?
No.
Not, we're adjourned.